Welcome into lcpioneers.com live, presented by PioStream, as we are with you 4 days a week, Tuesday through Friday, 11:30 a.m. Pacific Time on Facebook Live. You can see all of our past shows available to watch on demand, youtube.com/lcpios. A chance to stay connected with student athletes, coaches, alumni, and different members from throughout the Lewis and Clark College community. Hi there, I'm Ryan Goff. I am the play-by-play voice and director of athletic communications for Lewis and Clark. We are the Pioneers based out of Portland, Oregon, our really lovely campus, over 130 wooded acres, just 6 miles southwest of downtown Portland, and we compete in the Northwest Conference with other institutions from throughout Northwest Oregon and the state of Washington across 19 intercollegiate athletics programs. And it's NCAA Division III, so over 430 institutions across the country, a chance for our student athletes to compete on a national scale. And when we started the show back on the last day of March, it was in the beginning stages of the coronavirus pandemic. That, of course, continues, and we continue to keep you updated on the state of competition from throughout the Northwest Conference, input from the NCAA, the state, the county, the city, etc., all of the different areas at lcpioneers.com/COVID. Right now, Northwest Conference suspending competition through the end of the calendar year. January 1st, 2021 would be the earliest, and we'll update you as soon as we know anything else, as that decision was made in mid-August. Our guest today is Sam Taylor, the head coach of Lewis and Clark Rowing, so we'll have a chance to see how the rowing programs have adapted in the middle of the fall 2020 semester to the pandemic, and see what his team is working on as far as, staying together as a group, what's exciting, what's been difficult, what's been challenging, all of those things that every program at Lewis and Clark and across the country certainly is dealing with, something that we'll talk to Sam Taylor about in just a few moments. We do invite you to get in touch with the program. You can do so by leaving a comment in our Facebook Live comments. You can do that right below, or email us anytime, sports@lclark.edu. You can also sign up for Pioneers Weekly, a weekly newsletter that's distributed on Tuesday. You can do so at lcpioneers.com. We are on Twitter and Instagram as well. LC Pioneers, our handle on both. So that's exciting. We are also very thankful for everyone who participated in last week's Day of Champions. Over $109,000 was raised through donors totaling over 440, support across the board for all of our intercollegiate athletics programs. We certainly are appreciative of that. And we saw many of you during our Homecoming at Home athletics events a couple of weeks back. The Homecoming at Home celebration continues through the end of this week. It's all the month of October. You can find the latest schedule of events at go.lclark.edu/homecoming. A chance to stay connected with campus. That's at go.lclark.edu/homecoming. And then, of course, as I've mentioned, our YouTube page, a playlist updated yesterday, a fantastic conversation with Hannah Martin, a senior from women's basketball. Really palpable, her leadership, and it was great to see all the comments of everyone watching on lcpioneers.com/live. So with that said, let's bring in our guest for today, the longtime head coach of the rowing programs at Lewis and Clark. We welcome in Sam Taylor to lcpioneers.com live. Sam, second time on the show. I certainly appreciate you joining us. And we talked about all of the support that our teams experienced with the Day of Champions last week. I was amazed to see some of that support. It really is great to see the community come together.
Yeah, no, I wanted to extend a special thank you to everyone who gave for the rowing program specifically. I think we had over 40 donors. Alumni, we had parents, we had friends, and it was really cool. And I think for me especially, where that money goes for us is a lot goes to assistant coaches, our part-time assistant coaches who have been working incredibly hard this fall, and almost all of them work second jobs and are coming here, to help our athletes late in the day after they put in a full 8-hour day, and they just bring a lot of energy and passion and excitement, and they make my life a lot better. So I really appreciate being able to pay them, a good wage, and the support from our friends and family and alumni is directly responsible for that.
One of the things that I thought would be the coolest aspect of working in collegiate athletics with programs kind of harks back to not only the Day of Champions, but also looking back at those athletic events that we had for Homecoming at Home, because you get to see some of the faces of families. But you've been at Lewis and Clark a long time. I'm curious, when you think about the opportunity to get updated on where alumni that have gone through your program are, when you get a chance to see a family that you haven't seen in a while, how is that rewarding from the head coaching standpoint?
Oh, I think that's the best part, right? I think that, nobody goes into Division III athletics thinking, we're grooming all the future professionals, and like all of these people are going on to the Olympics. Although we have had alum in the Olympics, but for the vast majority of our athletes, they graduate and they go on to careers and families and adventures in life. And sometimes I'm just jealous of what they're doing because they're doing amazing things. But I have a lot of good friends who are alums, getting to see them, whether it's, on a regular basis, or you run into somebody a year or two later, or 5 years or 10 years later. And I think that's amazing. And we occasionally will do surveys with our alumni, just like, you see things on Facebook, you see things on Instagram, but just send a survey out and say, hey, what are you doing? Where's your career at? How have you gotten there? And I think that's always been something that I've really appreciated, getting that information back and then being able to share that with our athletes and with our recruits and say, look, the Lewis and Clark education may not take you where you expect when you show up, but it takes you incredible places. And I think that the liberal arts context and just the flexibility and the adaptability that you get with education at the college has taken our alum all over the world, and many of them through several career changes and in places they never would have expected.
Well, we've seen that through the course of the show too, in the conversations we've had with recently graduated alumni, those dating back to even, I think, class of 2002 is our longest distance between graduation and having them on the show. So with long tenure, like I mentioned, you being in the position, you've also probably
Ryan, are you calling me old?
I'm just stating how long we've had the pleasure of having you with our staff. And that also brings this idea of the pandemic, right? You're doing something that you've never had to do alongside coaches who might be in their first, second, third year of coaching. How have you had to adapt because of the pandemic? How has it affected your head coaching?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it brings us back to the core values, right? So to update people, we can't row due to college guidelines, county guidelines, state guidelines, et cetera. We found that it was impossible to get our athletes down to the water and get them in boats, which I think is, obviously that's the sport, right? So it's instead what our team is doing is training on land, on campus. On the rowing machines, we're training with weights, doing a little bit of cross training as well. And that's a big challenge because what we want to do is row, and quite aside from the competition piece. But I think that it also brought us back to the question of why we do what we do, right? So we had conversations with our athletes through the summer and then coming into the fall, and we sort of, before we started, we said, okay, what are we doing? It's like one piece of it is we're training for hopefully returning to competition and rowing in the spring. Like that's fingers crossed, wear your masks and keep practicing social distancing. That's what we want to do. But it also was a reminder that, what our athletics programs are about is a sense of community. It's a sense of progress and empowerment, right? That we set goals and work to achieve them. It is education. It is, how to persevere through difficulty. It is the community and the social support that you have within the team and with the coaching staff, that I think that a lot of our athletes have just really appreciate the touchstone every day of coming to practice and having an outlet physically and mentally, whether that's on the water or on the erg. And so I think that it brought us back to those goals and just say, okay, we can't do the thing that we most want to do. Like that's out of the picture. So what are we going to focus on? And then what we just decided we were going to focus on that community, on that social bond, on that progress and training for a goal, even if the goal didn't look like what we wanted it to. And then we were going to focus on the mental health aspect and just saying, that we are usually, I know for me, I went out this morning and did a hard workout, and I am better for doing that workout. That made my life better. And so for our athletes, I think that's usually the case as well. Just having that outlet.
Head coach of rowing, Sam Taylor, joining us on lcpioneers.com live. So you're talking about some of the things that you've focused the team around, some of the ways that they've been there, but I'm thinking resiliency, right? Like this is a story of student athletes going through uncertainty because, especially as you mentioned with your sport, how soon are we maybe going to get back on the water and it's been up in the air. So how do you describe some of the resiliency you've seen from your student athletes coming together?
Better than me. I think, I observed in a staff meeting yesterday that I feel like it's harder for the coaches sometimes, probably because we have, many more years of experience and maybe it's harder to adapt. Like we're less adaptable than the young folks on the team who, maybe are just able to roll with things. But I think that, they bring the enthusiasm. I think we try to guide that enthusiasm and maybe point it in the right direction. But really, if the team isn't enthusiastic, no matter how hyped up a coach is going to be, you're not going to achieve anything. And so what I've seen with the team has been like, despite the challenge, they have been showing up enthusiastic and ready to work hard. They call me out if we're not doing things that are challenging enough. They come up with great ideas, and I think just being willing to listen to that, and especially on the days that I think that, you know, maybe I've spent the day in a meeting hearing all about like, oh, the testing requirements, and oh, the thing that, you know, the doom and gloom. And you just show up at practice and you have athletes who are ready to work and ready to be together and ready to be excited. That is tremendously helpful for me. And I think that it's tremendously helpful for my assistant coaches. And so we've been trying to buoy each other up a lot, and I think that helps.
Yeah, I mean, that community aspect obviously is super helpful. Even you mentioned the staff meetings, getting just to see faces that we don't get to see.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you mentioned before we got on there, we haven't seen each other since March, and our
Yeah.
offices are 3 doors from one another, right? But that's part of the process to make everything work. And another aspect of the process for a collegiate head coach is you're still also thinking about recruiting while
Mm-hmm.
also navigating current practices amidst the pandemic. So let's talk about process to become a collegiate rower. What are some of the avenues by which someone could compete for the Lewis and Clark Pioneers?
Yeah, I mean, certainly we are recruiting now, and we're recruiting high school athletes, most of whom roam for clubs, some of whom row for schools. And I think that we have a great pool of prospects that we're talking to in a very different way. Like normally this time of year, we'd be really in pushing people to come to campus, and there's still a little of that, but for the most part, we're scheduling Zoom meetings instead, and like trying to get to know our prospects in that way. But the other thing that I think is super unique and I love about rowing is that there is still a very strong walk-on culture. And it is still a sport, even to the highest levels of collegiate athletics, that you can walk on with no prior rowing experience. And some of that is due to tradition, and some of that is due to the fact that rowing is not well penetrated across the country, right? Like there are hot spots that have great rowing traditions at the high school level, but there's also a tremendous number of places that don't have access to the sport. And so we get athletes from all sports who hear about us, and we go out and looking for them, and they come to us and they say, "Hey, I'm at Lewis and Clark College, and I'm interested in trying this." And one of the things that's been really cool about this year is, despite the fact that we haven't touched a boat, like none of our novice athletes have seen a boat, they're still walking on, and they still want to be part of the team. And I think we have 13, 14 athletes who have joined the team this fall, and literally have never been to our boathouse. And so that's super exciting to me because they're great athletes, and someday, whenever we get back on the river, they're going to bring a tremendous amount to the team. And I think what's really cool to me is that if they're going to willing to persevere through this fall, then I think the rowing part's going to be like, oh my god, this is fantastic, right? Like, so that's been pretty cool.
Yeah, another testament of resiliency for sure, which is what the one thing that's neat about having you on the show is a chance to kind of hear that firsthand, because we believe that that's happening, but I'm not working with teams, right? And so it's so great to hear that that's the case, including for your first year student athletes. We're talking to Sam Taylor, the head coach of rowing at Lewis and Clark, on lcpioneers.com live Tuesday through Friday, 11:30 a.m. Pacific time, and then archived on YouTube, youtube.com/lcpios. And I talked to you before we got on the air about what I miss the most, which is events. And it sounds like that rings true with you. Describe the setting in which Lewis and Clark rowing usually gets to be in when things aren't in a pandemic. Is there
Yeah,
a better
no.
setting, right?
Oh, I there might be somewhere, but I don't get to go there very often. I was just actually, and our athletes will probably resent this. I was out on the river this morning, so I have access to my own boat. So we row on the Willamette River. It's about a 10 to 15 minute drive from campus. It's phenomenally beautiful. It's a natural river. We have eagles and osprey, we have otter, we have sea lions, we have the salmon run. It's beautiful, and I think that is probably, for me, certainly it's the hardest part, because I am a lover of the outdoors. I'm a lover of nature, and like I so value the ability to get outside every day, which I'm now having to kind of force myself to do instead of having it built into the day. And I think that it's one of the things about rowing that makes it an amazing sport, is that ability to get on the water. And yes, you're working hard, and yes, you're training for a goal, and yes, we try to be focused, but you also have that ability to escape campus and get out into a natural waterway. And sometimes the weather is not always wonderful, but I think that challenge is part of what makes it special too. It's like understanding what your limits are and realizing how you can forge through some of those challenges as well. But the Willamette is it's a gorgeous place to row. It's a gorgeous place to be. Yeah, it's funny that we have professors who come down and ride in our launch, and are like, "What, you get to do this? This is your job?" It's like free boat ride. Like, come check it out.
Yeah, I remember the
So,
first time you let me out there too, and I just couldn't
yeah.
believe the setting. It was so calm and fun to do. I mean, I'm not great in the world of post-production media, but even just shooting and then thinking about the way that I wanted to assemble things, it was just a really peaceful place. And your coaching staff is so much fun to be around, including Coach Dog, which we talked to Jalen Hodges
Coach Dog
about.
gets a lot of attention, I think.
Well, deservedly so. In fact, I saw the other day on the Instagram, I believe, a beautiful shot of something that was drawn for Coach Dog.
Mhm.
Describe the coaching staff and how they've also helped you through the fall.
Yeah, no. So we have Claudia is our full time assistant coach, also your assistant, conveniently, and she brings. We joke sometimes. It's like I'm the statistics and the process and the sort of the numbers and the focus guy, and then she's kind of the emotion side of things, which is um, I think helpful. And I think one of the things as a coach that I've learned through good experiences and challenging ones is hiring coaches who complement you, but also contrast with what you bring to the table. And I think Claudia is a really good complement and a really good contrast, that she brings things that I don't have. Um, and I think that that's been really useful. And I think the other coach we have is Natalie Stroud, who's now going into her second year. She rode 4 years for us and then graduated and has been working a lot with those walk-on athletes I was talking about. And it's just such a great example of being someone who's enthusiastic and passionate, and also very fun and silly, and like brings some of that like really light attitude, just to remind ourselves that like hard work and having a good time are not mutually exclusive. And then Alexia was a 4 year graduate of Puget Sound, All American athlete, and she is works at Intel and very analytical person. Also, just extremely intelligent, and she does a lot of the back end work for us. So I don't know if we've talked about this. We're doing something called the Orange versus Black. Normally, this is 1 or 2 days for us. This year, we're doing 4 weeks because what else do we have to do? And it's a competition where we split the whole team into different groups. Orange team, black team, right? And they're all competing for points every day. And Alexia is doing all this back end work on the computer and these spreadsheets to calculate scores so that we can keep it interesting for the athletes, that it's not just how fast you go, right? But it's, hey, how much did you improve based on this workout? And like, okay, now we're going to try to have you, set a goal to achieve this thing. And I think for a coaching staff, like, you want to give the athletes interesting and fun goals, but it can be a tremendous amount of work to do all the statistical analysis to figure out if they've succeeded. And so having Alexia on the staff has been awesome, because she's taken a lot of that off my plate and really does a tremendous job of keeping that interesting. She's also just like, comes up with good ideas. So
It's a great staff, and it's great to hear just kind of the innovation amidst the pandemic and trying to figure out ways to make it work. It sounds like it's working for rowing. I certainly am eager to be able to hang out with everybody again. Next time we are able to be in the same place and you say, hey, I'm running to get a coffee, I'm going to come with you instead. I'm never going to take those
all
chances
right.
for granted again. Sam Taylor, we appreciate everything you do for our student athletes. Thanks so much for joining us on the show.
Well, thanks, Ryan. I appreciate the chance to talk to people.
Yeah, absolutely. Sam Taylor on lcpioneers.com live. Yeah, that's neat to hear the variety of things that rowing is doing, especially because we've seen on, we had Hannah Martins. We'll use basketball as an example. We've seen on the women's basketball Instagram, there's no contact, right? But they're in the gym, they're in the familiar setting, and they're shooting and they're doing a lot of things that are at least somewhat familiar. And while, yes, the crew teams do spend a good amount of time in the erg room, there's a lot of time spent on the river. And to hear that that's something that they're unable to do in a way that is conducive to the development of the student athletes, that's frustrating, I'm sure. So to hear all of the ways that the team and the coaches, talking about Natalie with fun and Alexia with fixing, the orange and black to become more of a semester long event or weeks worth of events. That's an interesting way to try to change things out. And one thing I will say about all of the Lewis and Clark coaches that we've had on the show is they have all typically indicated something that has come from the pandemic that they otherwise wouldn't have done in their normal year-to-year routine, that may actually end up staying with the team once everything resumes post-pandemic. And we don't know obviously when that will be, but certainly those are interesting things that you have an opportunity to try to innovate and change the way that things are going, because you have to. and all of the coaches have seemed to find something out of that, which I find super interesting. So big thanks to Coach Taylor for joining us, as all of the head coaches who join us. We try to have at least one every week on a rotational basis with 13 head coaches leading our programs. We don't have our guest list for next week yet, so be sure to check out lcpioneers.com/live this weekend to get updated show schedule. We do not have a new live program tomorrow, but we will have a rear of one of our prior lcpioneers.com live shows tomorrow in this time slot on Facebook Live. And then, like I said, all the shows are available to watch on demand. If you aren't already following us on Twitter, you can do so, LC Pioneers on Twitter as well as on Instagram. We have started to test replaying some of our shows the same day around 6 o'clock Pacific time on Twitter. And so far, with just 2 shows this week to try that, has seemed to work pretty okay. So if you ever do miss the live show at 11:30, but you're also not interested in finding it on YouTube, you can follow us on Twitter, LC Pioneers, and we're going to continue to try to see if that's something that we should do on an ongoing basis. So Coach Taylor's interview today will be seen tonight at 6 o'clock Pacific time at twitter.com/LC Pioneers. So until we have a chance to see you again next week live, I'm Ryan Goff. Thanks so much for having fun with us. Big thanks again to Coach Taylor for joining us, and I hope you have a fabulous weekend. Happy Halloween. I'm excited to get my costume all set up, at least virtual costume contest, that is. So until we see you again soon, I'm Ryan Goff. As I mentioned, I'm going to get out of here, and we appreciate you taking the time to join us on lcpioneers.com live, presented by PioStream. Goodbye, everybody.
I'm Ann Bentley. I'm an associate professor of chemistry, and in this research group, I supervise the 2 students working in the Rogers program this summer in our lab. The brown bag experience is a good chance for students to get experience presenting their work that they've done in the lab, especially to an audience that's not technical.
What's intriguing about the brown bag experience is it incorporates all of the Rogers program. So I'm able to hear people in the psychology department and what research they're doing, but it also gives us the opportunity to share our research with the greater science community at Lewis and Clark. And for incoming students, the summer program is really beneficial for getting opportunity in research. So I've had the opportunity for research in the past, but other students may not have the same opportunities. So it's nice to work in a professional lab setting and potentially have the opportunity to publish a paper, which looks really good moving on into doing professional research out in the field.
The students grow a lot during the summer in their ability to learn the techniques and apply the techniques and suggest their own ideas for what could come next and interpret their data. It's just a big, usually if they haven't done research before, they learn a lot in that short period of time.
We invite you to join us.
It's time to explore Lewis and Clark.